Welcome to the Little Brain Campaign. I'm Dr. Lauren LaRose, a child and adolescent psychiatrist.
And I'm Jessica Eisenstadt, a licensed professional counselor.
We're here to be straight with you about children's mental health.
And we're not afraid to challenge the trends that are out there about anything related to kids.
And we're not afraid to challenge each other either.
If you're looking to be validated from two moms that are in the trenches, you're in the right spot.
Yep, no fluff here. Just some honest conversation with a side of sarcasm.
Let's get into it.
Hello, Big Brains. Welcome to the Little Brain Campaign. We are your hosts, Lauren.
And Jessica.
We have the lovely Yanti Turang. I'm going to say it right eventually.
Yeah.
With us today.
So I worked with Yanti at Crescent City Schools. Like, she was there my first year, like emotional support. She was great. Anyways, and we've become fast friends over 8 years. But wow. Yanti, tell the people about you, girl.
Oh, yes. Well, hello, listeners. My name's Yanti Turang. I am a nurse by trade. As you can probably hear in my accent, I am Australian Indonesian. Grew up in Australia, so did all my schooling in Australia, and then had my sights set on the United States. And so moved to the United States almost 20 years ago.
That's crazy.
I know. It's kind of wild. Look, my first port in America, I played in rock and roll bands.
Cool. Wait, I didn't know that. Stop. But yeah. I can see it. It's a vibe.
So that was my vibe until like 2005. And since I just said we were living in New Orleans, I did go through Hurricane Katrina in 2005.
Yeah.
Was one of obviously the luckier people and a person with more access and choice to be able to get out.
Yeah.
Although a really pivotal moment for me, I was, playing guitar and bartending, and then Hurricane Katrina definitely gave me the perspective to want to do more. I, after that, did go back to Australia for a couple of years, and I did my accelerated nursing. So I became a nurse, always said I'd come back to New Orleans, and had my sights set on Children's Hospital. Worked at Children's Hospital for a couple of years before I was getting my itchy feet and sort of connecting the dots of, oh, wow, I'm in this huge hospital system. I do enjoy working in peds. I'm learning a lot, but it just kept...
Didn't scratch the itch fully.
Didn't scratch the itch, but it was more like, wow, how lucky we are in terms of, in the Western world, being able to access healthcare like this. And then I think I said I'm Australian. I'm also half Indonesian. And so simultaneously, obviously in touch with family in Indonesia, and had a parallel perspective at the same time of family members my age with children, older family members of mine not having access to healthcare and either suffering or dying from lack of access, education to primary healthcare.
Yeah.
And so in that, I decided, since I had no experience in it, I would found an organization and in international health. And so I started LearnToLive, and we started running programming, capacity building, healthcare training for, our solution was educating the healthcare worker,
Cool.
right? So we created programs, capacity building in maternal child health, chronic healthcare. We worked in communities in Indonesia. We worked alongside government, schools, universities, truly creating great partnership. And then we took the model and we also went to Laos, did maternal child health there, Kenya, and South Africa. And so we created this global organization, and people say, you did it. And I was like, no, I didn't do it. It was me and a slew of incredible like-minded people. And so I did that for the last, 10 years. And in that time also did the Ebola crisis, which also taught me a lot about public health, but leadership, but also more exposure to health inequity around the world. And then recently came back to the United States, was put in the and then I worked for Crescent City Schools as well.
Don't forget about that. That's the most important.
I know, that was important. And then, I came back to New Orleans and, was doing the international health. Crescent City Schools was, this moment where one of the leaders had reached out and was like, Yanti, you're a nurse. Like, we have this school and we're having trouble with the nurse. Could you come in and do some hours just to see? And when I set foot in the school, it was like a new world for me. Like, there was a connection between not only education, but the kids' experience, health, like it was sort of this triangle situation. And I realized when I was a nurse in the schools that I wasn't just a nurse for the kids. I was a nurse for the family.
Yep.
Right? And so that for the first time exposed me to not only the barriers in New Orleans, but the barriers of health and education in the United States and how the system is working against so many of the families that need help and access.
Yep.
And so, well, Jess, you know, it was in the trenches there, and we were working with, you know, some kids that, I mean, not only needed love, but needed structure, and moms that needed support and help with getting medication and understanding diagnosis. There was so many things. So I'd worked in that for a long time, and then started overseeing a lot of the different schools' kind of concept of what the school nurse was for Crescent City schools.
Like, what was the role? Like, what... Like, that's what you were trying to figure out.
Right. I was trying to work out that I felt like that the traditional school nurse had come from a place that was a room in a building where children would be sent. They would be given a mint, which you're just like, sugar. Oh, gosh. And
like a sip of water.
Or either minimized their feelings, minimized mom's family ailments, and didn't really deal with the problem. So I carried this in my mind for many years when I worked with Crescent City Schools. I'll just finish up and say then I ended up doing the big COVID response, right?
Yes.
For Louisiana Department of Health.
Yep.
So sort of shifted gears and opened the big convention center hospital here in New Orleans with Dr. Maslenka, Dr. Carlson, Esteban, and, you know, it was successful. We saw hundreds of patients. We, you know, curbed COVID for, you know, thousands of people in Louisiana. Yeah. The one thing that kind of kept me up at night during that were the kids. Yeah. The kids. And it wasn't about the kids getting COVID. It was the kids who relied on the school systems for their structure and food. And
basic needs.
Basic needs. And so I worked alongside Julie Lousay and Chris Hines from Crescent City Schools during COVID and consulted on the side whilst, you know, doing the hospital
all the
and
it's like
and
octopus.
We reopened those schools.
Yeah.
We were the first schools in Louisiana to reopen safely. Yeah. We had no contract of COVID, so we were able to keep the kids safe.
God, it's almost hard. Like, it's hard for me to remember. Like, it's just it's like you black out.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, of course, it was like a wild time, and so. That for me in my career is one of the proudest things I've ever done.
That's awesome.
And it wasn't about just keeping kids safe. It was like marrying the idea that these kids relied on their school system to be so many things and not just education.
Yep.
Right.
And so it was our duty to open them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
so we did.
Yeah.
And so, and then more recently, between that COVID, burnt out.
Yeah,
can you
correct.
imagine? Decided I want to be a mum myself. So fortunately was able to have a baby. We have baby
Sweet
Waya, little baby girl.
Sweet angel.
And, you know, being the person I am, I was like, all right, I've got to get back out there in the world. And so more recently in the last year, work for an amazing startup under Dr. Rebecca Gee, who was Secretary of Health for the state of Louisiana, in her response to families in need as well, called Nest Health. And so Nest Health, and I align with it so much, is a model that is bringing healthcare into the home, and we see the whole family. So right now, right, you see a mum is expected to bring her daughter, son, everyone
everywhere
to the primary care to not only get immunizations, but if someone has pneumonia, right? You know, I mean, I even have a car and I can function, and to get my child to the doctor, it's a nightmare.
Yeah. That, and so like from experience, like if you have a high needs kid and like I think I remember back in the day, it's like I would go to the pediatrician who would treat me for whatever the heartburn, you know, like whatever it was. And now what I'm seeing is like, you go to the pediatrician's like, GI, go to the GI.
Yep.
Wrap
around.
I go here. And so I'm fortunate. I have the luxury of being able to do that. Running around town, going to 50 different specialties. I mean, it's just.
Who aren't even communicating.
Nope.
And so what Nest does is we go in, we have a nurse practitioner, family advocate. We'll see mom, all 4 kids, get everyone up to date to what they are. Then we'll look at mom. Mom, what's going on with you? If you've got sick mom, you're going to have sick kids, right? So you've got to take care of mom. So this model, it's never been done in America, which sort of,
blows your mind.
Blows your mind of the world.
I mean, does
Ow.
it? Do you?
No,
what do you expect? Like,
no.
what do you expect?
It doesn't. So it makes me very excited to be a part of the change.
Yeah.
That, and a lot of that, obviously, we have to be engaged with, like, it's like for Medicaid families, which are the families that need it most, but it's engaging with, like, the Medicaid insurance companies. And so that's a fight in itself. Right? Of proving why the family model is how we can address our family needs in America. And so that's what I'm working with that. I work on lots of different projects because it's not just about delivering the healthcare. It's making sure the model works. It's making sure the business model works. So that's where I am at the moment.
Yeah.
That is so
you're
cool.
really not busy.
You do a few things.
Just a couple of things.
Just a couple of things.
I mean, piggybacking off of this idea that it blows your mind that this is like not tracking yet here in Western cultures, we want to pick your brain about differences in Australia, Indonesia, anywhere that you've been and spent a lot of time. Differences between academic expectations of kids, behavioral expectations of kids, parenting, all of those things, and how it impacts success, growth, resilience.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think even being biracial, so having an Indonesian perspective and then growing up in a socialized healthcare system and then also in a country with not many people, like population of Australia, 26 million people. Also super high GDP, so very wealthy country, but then you have a super homogenous country, which also is frustrating in itself.
Yeah.
But when I think of, like, if we're just looking at education, look, I've always been a huge proponent. I do love America and I cheer it on. I can tell you that the standard of education, and I'd say with, even from the little ones, I would definitely say the university, it's pretty rigorous in America.
Yeah.
And there's pros and cons for that, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that when I came to, work at children's hospitals as a nurse, I felt under-equipped, honestly. I was like, oh gosh, my nursing degree didn't really arm me with the information I need to read these labs properly, but
also, like, is that okay? That is a skill that you can pick up on quickly.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You don't need to go to school to learn that skill.
Yes. So that would be like from a tertiary level. But now it's interesting. I was just speaking to a friend of mine in Los Angeles about this, about, her 5-year-old is starting school at a public school in LA and they were just in school in Australia. And
how old?
He is just turned, I think he's 5.
Oh, interesting.
He
was in school in Australia last year.
Yes.
And so he was in, is that called pre-K4 or something? What is it called?
He was in grade prep and now he's going into, I guess, kindergarten in America. It's sort of taking me years to figure these things out. And it's really difficult.
Yeah.
But look, and I wouldn't even say if it's the rigorousness around the education that's implemented. It's more about what the norm is in America of what the baseline is for play equipment, for space, for where the priorities are, like a shade cloth, music in the morning.
Yeah.
So that for me it has been jarring. Like even childcare, the expectations of what I think is like how childcare should be at school are very vastly different to what is necessarily available. And what is available, you would have to pay top dollar for. Whereas in Australia, it's part of the system.
Yeah.
Like state. Like state. So the charter, public, selective, whatever schools get funded by the state, and the state isn't allocating the funds for those resources to be available for the schools. I'm wondering also, and it's not just charter. There are 10,000 schools in this city.
Yeah.
There are 10, I mean, they're not 10,000, but there are so many schools. And it's like, maybe part of it is like, there's not enough money because there's so many schools.
Well, there's so many people.
There's so many people, but yes. But anyways, keep going.
Yes. And so it's conflicting, right? Because there's parts of the American system that I would only have dreamed of for like my nieces in Australia.
Like what?
Access to, what would I think about for them? Just conversation. Let me think of like diversity, people. the way that America talks about your history is so much more matter of fact. Like I'm coming from a country in Australia where we've only really talked about what happened historically and how we got to Australia in the last like 15, 20 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I really feel as though that those fundamental things that you guys were taught when you were young about where you've come from, how, and they may have been hard to hear.
Yeah.
Actually built a reasonably resilient like baseline. Whereas in Australia, like, you know,
I've never been, so I don't know much about Australia.
it's very
I've never
white.
been. Okay, so I don't know. I haven't been. Like, I
Yeah.
don't even know like what the culture is. Like, what are the norm? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it could be controversial what I say because
Wait, this is where we do
We're here
that.
for controversy.
This is not.
I mean, I think I know what
sweet
you're
and
talking
I don't,
about.
but I don't.
I think I know what you're talking
I
about.
don't.
Australia is a very homogenous white space.
Okay.
And once, and I mean, as polls would say, or how, you know, politically they've moved, has suggested that that's where they want to be.
Okay.
Right. And so that conversation of it's not even just diversity, it's difference has never really been accepted.
Yeah.
And so growing up biracial in a small country town in Australia, I was certainly exposed and, you know, had racism, experienced that as a small child, was told to go back to the country I belong in kindergarten by Matthew Hubbard. I remember.
Oh, you little fucker, Matthew Hubbard.
Right?
Matthew,
Like that was
fuck
like
off.
that was that
punk.
trauma moment. But
Yeah.
you know, I think, but then there's this side of me where I'm like, wow, like I would love for all like kindergartens and, you know, elementary schools in America to have that Australian like beautiful bubble, like it's safe, not safe from violence. It's the world is small, right?
Yeah.
It's a small experience.
You're not exposed.
Yeah, and I think in urban America, it's a lot. Like
It's a lot.
You know, I mean, even if you think about the teachers that show up to schools here, it's a lot for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think that they would necessarily have like the financial compensation and, you know, the ability to get to school, vehicles, all of these things, public transport. Like you look at New Orleans, like they show up stressed. Their cortisol is already high.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're already working under pressure. I still can't believe in America that teachers have to ask for the resources for their classrooms.
Yeah.
I'd never been exposed to that. Like, why is childcare, like, you know, here's your list. And I was like, oh, I'm happy to do it. But
What?
it just,
Like,
instead of sort of being like, well, this is ridiculous, I shouldn't have to, I'm like, oh, it's more about like, there's not enough to go around.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of places that want to care, like want to do more, but they don't have the resources. And so understanding where that fits and is really kind of complicated.
Very, very complicated. I mean, so in Australia, it's like you send your kid, like, is it public? Like, I don't know how school systems are.
It's a good. So we have a public system and then we have a private system.
Okay.
And then you've got the super, I call it the super private system. So in the middle private is the Catholic schools.
Okay.
Okay.
It's the religious
That's kind of what
schools.
it's kind of similar to New
Yeah,
Orleans in
I
a
mean,
way.
like you have ISAS, Archdiocese, Catholic, whatever,
Right.
and then charter or selective or whatever. Charter.
Right, like a high-end, like private school. So in Australia, we'd call it the private schools, which were not really a religious affiliated. Then you'd have the private but Catholic, but
So it's like you got your
resident.
country days, like your country day, your Newman.
independent private schools.
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
independent private schools
Yeah.
is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Then you have
Yeah.
your Catholic ones,
Yes.
Right.
and then you'd have your public
Public.
ones.
Yeah.
So in Australia, the public system, it's funded and it's funded well, but it hasn't been a place to foster like growth, innovation. It's not
Okay.
like I found when I came to America, I was like, wow, like people were so proud that they went to public school. Like some of my friends from
Yeah.
the Northeast,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
because they got some of the best public schools, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in Australia, if you were like, oh, I went to this, we call it a state school, you'd be like, oh, you know, you probably just got mediocre education.
I mean,
which
listen,
actually
but
was
that's-
still probably high.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, in Mobile, it was like that. Like,
Okay.
it was very much, and we didn't have, well, maybe there were not, I mean, it's small, so there was like not a lot of schools. But I mean, it was very much like private, public.
Right.
Looked down upon, rich, you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
it's very like discriminatory in that way.
No, definitely. And I mean, Australia is definitely that as well. And then, I mean, as a new mum now, I'm like, oh, when the child's there, you just do whatever you can afford is the best opportunity.
I know, we had a conversation, and it's like, and like full, you know, okay, so you have this like idyllic like idea, right, for your kid in school. You have that, you know, and then it's like as a parent, you want a community, like a parent community, right? And you want education, but then you want opportunity, and then you want diversity, and it's like the list goes on. And so you just kind of like go for what you think is best and like see what happens. Like with my kid, like we'll see if he can like dog it in a private school because it's, you know, whatever. But if not, like because they don't have the, you know, they may not have the resources to support him with his language delay.
Right.
Yeah.
And like if they don't, I'm not going to shove that school down my family's throat because of optics. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're going to a charter school where they do have the resources.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And like, anyways, but yeah.
But I think that comes from a self-awareness of a parent, right? And like not making them about the parent, like the choice.
Yeah.
It's
but that's also because exposure. You know what I mean? Like work, like if I didn't work in the community prior to working at a charter school for years, you know what I mean? I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know that that's even a thing, that they had an abundance of resources.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't know that Crescent City Schools is like, unfortunately, like where the best sped programs are.
Yes, it truly is.
It truly is. And it sucks because they're overloaded, but you know, it just happened.
Yeah.
Anyways, but I wouldn't know because
I mean,
it's not
that's
talked
what's
about.
cool about the charter is in New Orleans is like the progressiveness of the wraparound services. Like people don't realize like what it takes.
Yeah.
To like have a kid be successful who's struggling, especially if home isn't okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's so layered on. Whereas like if I think of Australia, I don't know if we'd have all of those wraparound services and if it would be in state or would it be in private?
But would you, okay, so let's talk about this. Kids who need resources, support, speech, OT, PT, applied, whatever, counseling, whatever it is. How, do schools in Australia have things like a 504, an IEP? Are there psychological exceptionality? You know what I mean? Like, is that a thing?
That would be interesting to talk to my sister because she's also a teacher out there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and she's like a veteran and she's been in the system for a long, long time.
I wonder if we could we'll talk about that.
You
after,
could probably
but
get her on.
Yeah.
And from my own experience, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
But it's been a long time since I've been in the school system. But I also have friends. Look, this is another option. This is another, not option, but scenario is that, but Australia is also set up with the resources to support families with children with disabilities, learning disabilities. Like that's already part and parcel of a socialized system. Like we have respite for families that's just locked in and paid for the government that supports you, that will come over to your house. Like if you need speech OT, that's just sort of like locked into your primary care. It's not something that your school's going to detect. It's going to be from
like your pediatrician, like you come out of the hospital.
Yep.
Like let's say you come out of the NICU or whatever, and like feeding therapy. And so like, cause so when you're an infant, you can like speech language pathologists are utilized for feeding. And so that would be like automatic. Like you go home and it's already handled.
Because do you know what? You go
nice.
home with your baby and a midwife comes and sees you day 1.
What?
Day 2. Day 3.
Oh my gosh.
Then you're linked to the maternal child healthcare center in your region and which is your neighborhood. And then you're seen by that maternal child healthcare nurse every week for 10 weeks.
In your home?
Either in your home or or they encourage you to take the baby out and and get it weighed and to socialize. And then they connect you to a mother's group.
Oh my gosh.
And so many years, many moons ago when I hadn't had a baby, but friends of mine here in New Orleans did, I was like, well, you'll get connected to a mother's group. And they were like, what are you talking about? So I started my own.
Wow.
And I had a group of women come to my lounge room. And we'll just
what's a lounge room? Your
Your living room.
Oh yeah. And we would just talk it out.
You
know, I ran into a mum the other day and she goes, Yanti, is that you? My daughter's 10 now.
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh, was it helpful? And she's like, oh, there's just talking it out, not feeling alone. So I'm saying, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the system was already set up
Yeah.
For those families that would
support.
have fallen through the cracks here.
Or that wouldn't
was-
get or wouldn't get noticed until grade 3 or something.
Right, because we had a kid, remember Jay at Crescent City Schools. Like he came and his mom said, oh, he walks funny.
Yeah. Yep. How old? I can't even remember. Was it kindergarten?
He was at kindergarten, and I remember Kevin coming and being like, Yanti, come out to the parking lot, have a look at how he's walking.
Yeah.
And I mean, truly, I can't remember what the diagnosis was, but, you know, it ended up sort of within a lower limb paralysis. And he was such an angel boy, but we were the ones that did the digging.
Detecting.
I called Children's Hospital, and they said, we had no follow-up from mom, probably because of usual social barriers.
Yeah.
Since he was 8 months old.
And that was probably the first time he went to school.
And he was seen.
Huh? Yeah.
And so we connected him, and I mean, it's kind of insane. Like
it's insane.
Like that's insane. That's insane.
It is.
And that mom was just like, I wasn't sure where to go, who
to talk to, how to get there.
Yeah.
Because how are you supposed to know that?
You're not supposed to know.
Call Children's Hospital. So what I'm saying is like the systems, like probably Australia, probably most of Europe, most of Northern Europe, have this social function already embedded to be able to support
the population.
Zero.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. And so that is what kind
America.
of sets people in this different sort of place. But then like I've experienced life in Indonesia and seen thousands of patients who are there and mums who are doing unbelievable work. Like I'll give you this example. I had a mum with a special needs kid. He was 12.
What was the special need?
Yeah. I'd say cerebral palsy.
Okay.
I would say cerebral palsy.
Okay.
Came to our clinic. Mind you, our clinics are in remote Indonesia. All Indonesian healthcare workers, foreign healthcare, together we're, and, essentially we would deliver, a healthcare education, refer and things like that. Mum comes with this 12-year-old, holding hand, the kid's not making any eye contact. And first approach, and I look at him and, as a nurse, I'm like, wow, his skin is in really good shape, right? So you look and you think often kids who are neglected.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
The skin's not doing great.
Yeah.
Right? There's
Chapped.
signs, right?
Yeah.
Like dehydration, not drinking enough.
Yeah.
And the more we talked to mum that day, and she, first of all, we commended her on clearly you're in a small remote village in Indonesia
doing
by the ocean.
amazing, yeah.
She also has to work in the fields to earn the amount of money to be able to support.
Yeah.
He had really amazing skin, nonverbal, all of this. There was no wheelchair. He could kind of walk. And then we said, Mum, what do you do with him when you go to work?
Yeah.
And so Mum goes, come to my house.
Oh, God.
And she had essentially built, and I hate to use the word cage,
Oh, geez.
but she had to.
Yeah. That's what else.
What else is she going to do?
She literally had to build this cage situation with a bed and like a bathrooming situation in the back of, let's face it, a shack to keep him safe.
Wow.
But what a testament to mum, given like all the adversity and the conditions.
Yeah.
You look at his skin, he was like fed well, like there was connection there.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, truly I've met mothers, families, and people that have like overcome what I feel like the impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, yes. Okay. So so we are reading, whatever. Hunt, Gather, Parent.
Oh yeah. That's a friend of mine.
The author's a friend of yours?
I know, well, a friend of mine's friend. Yes.
Yeah.
A very, very, very good friend.
Oh, wow.
Yes. He's an oncologist here, and it's one of his best friends. So,
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, well, we definitely
I'm
want.
obsessed with this book.
So that sparked my memory of like simplicity,
Yeah.
like it to us. I mean, like you say cage, and I think anyone, anywhere, but like to us, that sounds jarring, right? And in that culture and those circumstances, this is what you have to do, and it's not, you know what I mean?
Childcare.
No.
There's no like socialized support system there. I have another like great example from when we did reproductive health education and capacity in the mountains of Laos. So up near the Chinese border with the Hmong people, which are transient nomadic people. Beautiful, amazing people. Education was great. We did the women, the men, the girls, the boys. But one of my most profound moments, honestly, with these two little kids, and I've got a photo of them. She was probably 4, and She had her little brother strapped with fabric on her back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
She was carrying all the dishes
Oh my gosh.
in a huge basket
Yep.
from the house down to the river.
To what? Yeah.
And I watched her and her little brother, who was probably 1.5, and he'd just play around. And she washed all of the dishes, put them back into the basket, strapped him back on.
Yep.
Walked up past like where we were like waving, and then on back to her house.
Yeah.
Wow.
Maybe 4.
But like
Maybe.
But that is called like teaching, obviously skill, but like community.
Well, yeah, that's a collectivist like mindset, right? We're all like, you know, contributing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so on that note, parenting differences between, you know, families that you see in the U.S., families that you see in other places in the world.
Of course. I think I always lean on. So I come from obviously Australia, very individualistic, you know, similar to America.
Yeah.
However, I was exposed to a collectivist sort of mindset of like how, you know, I don't know, like village raises a family, but everyone's involved. I would say for me, Australia and America are quite similar, and I would say they're lonely.
Yeah.
It's lonely parenting.
Absolutely.
In a way.
Isolating. Yep.
It's isolating and lonely.
Confusing.
We're overstimulated by whatever we're seeing on screen or mum down the shops and things like that. Whereas like the families that I've seen, even though they're dealing with probably the conditions of living are so much harsher, say in Laos, Kenya, and in South Africa, I would say that the parenting style there is so much more fluid and open. And the child, I remember in Kenya, so I remember learning this when we were working with our friends out there. Children there are seen as like little gods and goddesses. They could do no wrong. They can do no wrong.
Yeah.
And they'll always be picked up and they'll be given whatever they needed, just as long as they're shown love. I think it's up until the age of 8 and then they sort of organize them.
Yeah.
But that for me was like very interesting. It wasn't about like trying to control them and teach them and say, this is what's right and this is what's wrong. They would, our colleagues out there would always say, you know, we just show them the way, like how we're behaving to other people is like how they'll imprint. But the most important right? But the most important thing is their primary needs are met, and they're shown love. These are children, no diapers, no running water, no floor, dirt huts, you know, and I mean, there's obviously the primary needs and the challenges. I'm not sort of trying to glorify poverty here at all. I'm just more saying that it's an energy that like a parent will bring no matter what condition it is, and it's not about controlling them. It's about loving and supporting them. And so I feel like, you know, that builds resilience, and it's like very different to what I've seen in this kind of isolating Western world.
Yeah. Well, and I would assume that it's also a lot of family members and neighbors and like the community helping. It's not just like one mom, one kid. You know,
it's like grandma, whoever else. I mean, some of the most amazing conversations and child rearing. Like I was doing water projects in Kenya with the Maasai women. And also Maasai women, they're the ones that work. Okay. The men don't.
Love it.
Interesting.
You know, that was hard to stomach at times, especially when we were building a water project and we were like, okay, great, we're going to employ the local team. All the women show up.
Wow.
Like,
what are the men doing?
Just chilling.
Really?
So that's its own.
Okay, that is super interesting.
That's interesting. Yes,
but not stay at home dadding. Like just like off.
They're just relaxing.
No, they're just
they're not providing any. So this is a problem.
I mean, look into the Maasai. Like it's definitely a thing.
Wow.
But for me, just in terms of women resilience and being with their babies, I had women.
With babies on them.
Constructing like mud brick water tanks with babies on them.
Wow. That's amazing.
And maybe a toddler over there.
Yeah.
Like
mind-blowing.
And then the toddlers are helping take care of the babies.
Then walk a mile home.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Carry water. You know, it's just,
I mean, it's heartbreaking, but like this is the world, and like no, you know what I mean, like
and I think sometimes it's like people, like there's this is so bad, and I don't want us to feel terrible. Like I understand, like I built Learn to Live because I know simply that like some people like I was lucky enough to be born into Australia.
Yeah.
Like I came out of my mum in Australia. It could have been in Afghanistan.
Correct.
It could have been,
God,
you know, like, but that it's so, I think sometimes if we look in situations of like pity and it's like, no, it's just like, all we have to do is like fight for the equality. Like we have to like bring access, like share education, use the internet to empower people more through education.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just,
Well, and also recognizing that like just because you have resources that someone else doesn't have doesn't mean that like you can't learn something from them.
Oh,
you know, like
yes.
you can observe them and be like, man, you're a much better parent than I am. And there's a lot that I can learn from you, you know?
Yep.
And like looking at those women and being like, that's so awe inspiring that they're so strong and they're so resilient, you know? And
I mean, they have their, I mean, definitely there's like breakdowns and like, you know, but I guess what I loved about the women and the relationship with the kids and what I've seen everywhere is that it truly is like for moms or new parents, like it is just about connecting with that little person and making them feel safe and loved.
Yeah.
No matter what the conditions are, then that child will thrive.
Yeah.
Right?
It's true.
It's that simple.
If you just show up.
Yeah.
And, you know, I can tell you like as a new mom, like it's hard. Like it's really hard. Like I love my work and I love doing that, but I've also got to show up as a mom and I've got to make sure that Y knows that I'm like right there. You know, I guess you guys would have the same thing. Anyway, these are all different.
I mean, I think and like, I feel like this is like the theme of today.
Yeah.
Full-time working moms. Like I think there's a lot of undue pressure that social media, quote unquote, experts, this person, that person puts on the population of us that it's quantity of time over quality of time.
Yeah.
Like if, like I see my kids sometimes for 30 to 45 minutes after work before bed, but my phone's not around.
No.
Like I am on the ground with them. Like I'm snuggling them. And I believe that is enough.
100%.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like on the weekends, like it's them, all them, you know, we're at the pool, we're doing whatever. Like you're coming with the grocery and it's like undivided attention. It like, I'm not going to feel less than or guilty because I'm working.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and
like,
it's also like, I hate this culture of like, blaming the mom. The blame is always put on the mom, right? It's your fault that you're working, and so that means you're not being a good parent.
It's
you're
like
not
the undoing of these structures. You know, this didn't set up for, you know, it's a very heteronormative like way to look at the world.
Yeah, it's like why aren't we talking about dad? He's right there.
Yeah,
you know,
or the dads get the cheers and the medals.
Yeah.
Oh, he's such a Like,
he's such a great dad.
Yeah,
He's at the supermarket with the child.
Good for him.
Yeah. I don't know.
But I must say, I do see a lot more like active fathers in the world. Like truly in the world. Like we were in Prague last year and I was at the play equipment and I was like, it was all men with the kids.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I would say that, like more involvement.
Yes.
Whether that means purely supervising or driving to school. But
involvement, that's a good thing.
Yeah. Like
maybe not intuitive.
Yeah, maybe not like they're alive, like the kids are alive, period. You know what I mean? Like, great. They're more the involvement has increased. Yeah. Talk about mental health and kids across cultures.
Yeah.
Like trends, things that you're seeing in westernized over here that is like not a thing elsewhere.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I can absolutely I mean, we were just in Europe in the summer. I was able to work remotely and just looking at the children, their engagement levels there and like how they're interacting with their parents in comparison to the United States. The one big difference, there's no screens.
Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that. Thank you for saying that.
There's no screens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, that's it.
And I mean, look, I worked in Indonesia as well. I was, with my team out there recently and there was a lot of kids on the screens too. I mean, it's not just sort of the United States, like it's just kind of how the parenting is happening. But that would be, I would say, the biggest difference in terms of like engagement, lack of tantrums and things like that, which was like really obvious to me.
Yeah. I mean, do you know anything about like trends and autism, for example, and ADHD. Australia, a thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Similar to here in terms of age of diagnosis.
Yes, I would say that the world has become more, I look back and gosh, I probably had ADHD as well, right? There was a lot of undiagnosis that happened in the 90s and we were all just told we were bad kids.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's just like, it's medicine. Like, I think there's an evolvement of understanding the psychology of the human. And so we're seeing that. I would say that you are seeing more of these diagnoses in countries that correlate with having access to education.
Yeah.
Right? And that's going to be the West.
Yeah.
Okay, or Singapore or Japan. Countries with more resources, more like robust universities, and
Do you think it's getting over
diagnosed? It's a good question. I wouldn't say it's overdiagnosed if it's coming from a mental health provider, but potentially an overdiagnosis that might be happening with GPs and people that haven't specialized in the space. Jess, you will remember probably when I was working as a nurse in the schools, I'd have my 20 kids on their Ritalins and all of these things. And one of my own personal goals was just like how I interacted with them was seeing like when physicians or teams of healthcare providers would increase doses based on one appointment, I would question them.
Yeah.
And I would call and say, do we need to really increase the dose here? I do think the performance is fine. And so that's the stuff I worry about. I'm not necessarily worried about I don't want kids overly medicated, but medicated and also with a goal at the end to potentially wean. Or with a goal to say, actually, maybe we can change this type of medication. I feel like there's that one-stop diagnosis, and then we're like, oh, well, if they're acting out, let's just increase it to 20 milligrams. Why don't we maintain this and then try another intervention? But I haven't been in the space too much to see it. And I feel like it's worrying because depending on what health provider you have in the school and their experience will jade what the sort of outcome is for the school. If I was heavy, hey, we need to get all this medication for these kids. This is how we're going to get them in line, blah, 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 blah. I feel like Crescent City Schools, not for them, but they might be okay. Because schools don't have even the access to the health education or the consult to be able to make informed decisions.
They're going to trust what you say because you're the professional.
And so that's sort of I've thought about it a lot. I thought about those kids that were over medicated. I've reduced medication. I've talked to mom and said, I don't think they need to be on this 2 times a day short acting. Maybe we do a long acting, slower dose in the morning
or the 4th grader who's on a mood stabilizer
or
antipsychotic.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Well, let's get to the root cause. Why are we having mood disorders?
Right.
What's happening at home?
Right.
Who isn't there? What happened when they were 3?
Yeah.
And that's not the family's fault. That's the physician's fault.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
They're not doing an investigation. And that's where Nest
Correct.
Health can help.
Yeah. Oh my God. Perfect plug. Wrap it up. So we are running out of time, but you're going to be a repeat offender.
Okay.
I want to get into
so
this.
Much for coming.
I know. I want to get into this this medication diagnosis, that's a whole other chapter of this book.
That's a different onion we got to
Yeah.
peel.
No, and I think a lot of parents need to they want to make informed decisions.
And know that you have a voice.
Yep.
Yes.
That you are you have a voice. Anyways, Yanti, plug all of your things that you want to plug and look at that camera. This camera.
Which camera? Oh, this one. I'm Yanti. Please look at LearnToLive, www.learntoliveglobal.org. That's my international organization I work with. And then more locally and nationally in America, Nest Health.
You can also find LearnToLive on Instagram. I follow them.
Oh yeah, LearnToLive HQ, and then Nest I think it's Nest Health or Nest Home for our Instagram there.
Perfect.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Hopefully you're not alone and we're all in the trenches together.
We're always here, so reach out and let us know what's driving you nuts. We got you. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Little Brain Campaign on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
Questions or topics you want us to tackle? Hit us up on all of our socials at the Little Brain Campaign. Keep trucking. You got this. We'll see you next week.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. Remember, no one size fits all. Always consult a professional for personalized advice.